At exactly 4:20 p.m., the sound stopped. For 5 minutes straight, the noise had been steady. Thump, thump, thump. A small red rubber ball striking a garage door again and again, careless and alive. The kind of sound parents barely notice because it means everything is normal. It means your child is close, safe, still within reach. Then nothing. No cras, no scream, no footsteps running away. Just absence. Inside the house, a roast sat in the oven, filling the kitchen with warmth. A news anchor's voice murmured in the background, talking about traffic delays and weather that didn't matter. Life was moving forward like it always did. Outside, time stopped. When Lisa Johnson looked up from the counter, she didn't feel fear yet. Fear doesn't arrive first. Denial does. Children wander. Children get distracted. Children chase squirrels and clouds and ideas that vanish as quickly as they form. She waited a few seconds, then a few more. The quiet pressed in. No laughter, no bouncing, no voice answering when she called her daughter's name through the open window. The street sat still under the late afternoon sun. No passing cars, no neighbors talking, no sound except the distant hum of a freeway far away. Lisa stepped onto the porch. That's when she saw it. The red ball. It rested in the driveway, motionless, as if it had simply given up. The gate beside it wasn't locked. It never stayed unlocked. That latch was habit, muscle memory. Close it every time. Check it twice. Keep the dog in. Keep the children safe. The gate hung open just enough to notice. Just enough to matter. Lisa's heart dropped before her mind could catch up. She walked faster, then faster still. She reached the sidewalk and turned left, then right, scanning a street she had trusted for years. Empty. Her voice broke when she screamed Emily's name. By the time Richard Johnson raced home from work, the neighborhood had already begun searching. Doors were knocked. Backyards checked. Storm drains peered into. Names shouted until throats burned. Nothing. No torn clothing. No marks in the dirt. No car screeching away. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. When police arrived, they found what would haunt the case for decades. A scene that refused to explain itself. No struggle. No witnesses. No sound. A child gone without permission, without warning, without mercy. It was as if she evaporated. This is the part people don't like to sit with. The anger, not just at whoever took her, but at the silence that followed. At the neighbors who didn't notice. At the street that stayed calm. At the world that didn't stop. A 7-year-old does not disappear quietly. But that afternoon she did. And the worst part? This kind of disappearance doesn't look dramatic. No flashing warning signs. No obvious danger. Just a normal day that turns violent without asking permission. That's what makes it terrifying. Every parent watching this feels it now. Every neighbor. Every person who has ever trusted a quiet street. Could this happen where you live? Because it didn't happen in an alley. It didn't happen in the dead of night. It happened in front of a house. In daylight. On a street that felt safe. That's the question this case forces on all of us. And it doesn't let go. What you don't know yet, what no one knew for 18 years, is that this silence didn't mean the story was over. It meant it was buried. A child taken. A family frozen in grief. A truth locked away where no one thought to look. And somewhere far from that quiet street, a life continued under a name that was never hers. This is not just a story about a missing child. It's about time stolen, about memory erased, about how close evil can stand in normal life without being noticed, and how, sometimes, the truth waits years before demanding to be heard. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Within minutes of Emily Johnson vanishing, the street stopped being a place to live and became a place to search. Front doors opened and never fully closed again. Neighbors walked the same stretches of pavement again and again, calling a child's name until it no longer sounded real. Backyards were checked without asking. Fences were stepped over. Garbage bins were opened. Storm drains were lifted. Every inch of the neighborhood was touched by panic pretending to be action. Some searched with urgency. Others searched with guilt. Everyone searched with the same quiet fear. What if we missed the moment that mattered? The daylight felt cruel, bright, uninterested, and still nothing. In the first hour, people believed Emily was close. Maybe she wandered. Maybe she followed someone she recognized. Maybe she was hiding, scared, waiting to be found. That belief kept legs moving and voices calling. By the second hour, the belief weakened. By the third, it began to crack. Parents held their own children tighter without realizing it. Conversations dropped into whispers. The questions became sharper, less comforting. How far could she have gone? Would a car be involved? Why didn't anyone see anything? Hope was still there, but it was starting to lose ground. Squad cars rolled in just after dusk. Red and blue lights washed over lawns that had never known them. Radios crackled. Notebooks opened. A routine that was anything but routine began. The case was assigned to Detective Silas Vance, a calm, restrained presence from the Los Angeles Police Department. He had seen missing children before, enough to know what the clock meant. The first thing he did was not promise miracles. The second thing he did was listen. Every neighbor repeated the same answer to the same question. No, they hadn't seen Emily leave. No, they hadn't heard a struggle. No, they hadn't noticed a stranger nearby. The answers were consistent. That was the problem. Detective Vance examined the driveway, the gate, the quiet stretch of road where a child had been moments earlier. There were no drag marks, no damaged plants, no dropped belongings. The latch showed smudges, nothing clear enough to hold on to. The ground gave nothing back. This wasn't chaos. It was absence. And absence is harder to fight than evidence. In cases like this, investigators rely on something, anything to lean on. A sound, a witness, a direction. Here, there was only a child-shaped hole in the afternoon. As night settled in, the question everyone avoided finally surfaced. If no one saw her leave, how did she go? Doors were knocked on again. Statements were repeated. Timelines were built and rebuilt. The margin for error shrank with every passing hour. Still, no ransom call came. The phone stayed silent. That silence carried weight. Because when a child is taken and no one calls, it changes everything. It strips away motives people understand and replaces them with something colder. Late that night, one detail finally disrupted the dead end. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, spoke up with hesitation written across her face. She hadn't seen a child taken. She hadn't heard shouting, but she had noticed something that didn't belong. A car, a faded blue sedan parked near the corner earlier that afternoon. Not speeding, not loud, just there long enough to register as unfamiliar. She couldn't recall the license plate, couldn't describe the driver beyond a shape behind glass. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack in the stillness. Detective Vance wrote it down carefully. In a city like Los Angeles, faded blue sedans were everywhere. Without a plate, a time stamp, or a witness who saw a child enter the vehicle, the detail balanced on the edge between hope and frustration. But thin leads matter in the first 48 hours. They keep the search alive. Teams were notified. Alerts expanded. A direction, any direction, was better than standing still. Yet even as effort increased, the street grew quieter. Searchers drifted home. Flashlights flicked off. The crowd thinned. Emily had not come back. Inside the Johnson house, no one slept. Every ring of the phone sent Lisa Johnson reaching for it with shaking hands. Every passing car outside pulled Richard to the window. Neither of them said what they were thinking. That every minute without news made tomorrow harder. That time was no longer neutral, and that somewhere out there, something had already gone terribly wrong. By morning, flyers were printed. By afternoon, they were everywhere. A child's face stared back from poles, store windows, and gas stations. 7 years old. Missing. Last seen playing outside her home. And as the first 48 hours closed, one question remained unanswered, heavy and unavoidable. If someone could take a child from a quiet street without being seen, what else could they do without anyone noticing? Emily's bedroom did not change. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Yet the room stayed exactly as it was the afternoon she vanished. The bed was made. The stuffed bear sat near the pillow, its fur pressed flat from years of being held. Crayons lay scattered on the desk, frozen mid-project. Shoes waited by the door, still lined up the way Lisa insisted they be. Dust settled quietly. No one cleaned it, because cleaning meant accepting that Emily wasn't coming back soon. And that was something her parents refused to do. Richard Johnson grieved by leaving the house. He stayed late at work, volunteered for projects he didn't care about, and drove longer routes home just to delay walking through the front door. The silence inside the house felt heavier than any office noise ever could. Lisa grieved by staying close. She sat near the phone for hours, jumping at every sound. She replayed the afternoon again and again, searching for a moment she could undo. She blamed herself for trusting the street, for not looking out the windows sooner, for believing safety was permanent. They were both drowning. They just chose different directions to sink. They didn't separate. People expected them to. Friends whispered about it. Strangers assumed it. Many families don't survive this kind of loss. But Richard and Lisa stayed together, bound by something heavier than love alone. Guilt. Neither blamed the other out loud, but both carried silent accusations inside themselves. Words went unsaid. Comfort came in small, careful gestures rather than long conversations. They slept in the same bed, but faced different walls. Their marriage didn't collapse. It stalled. Time behaved differently in the Johnson house. Mornings felt rushed. Nights stretched endlessly. Holidays arrived and left without meaning. Birthdays became painful reminders instead of celebrations. Emily would be 8 now, then 9, then 10. Each year added another layer of grief. Lisa marked the growth on a doorframe anyway. She guessed where Emily's height might be, drawing faint pencil lines no one else noticed. Richard avoided those marks. Some pain demanded distance. Outside the Johnson home, life continued at full speed. Neighbors moved away. New families arrived. Children grew up. Streets changed. Stores closed and reopened under new names. News cycles shifted. Faces on television changed. But inside the house, it was always the same year. Always the same, unanswered afternoon. They kept the same phone number, the same address, the same routines. They were terrified that changing anything might erase Emily's path back to them. What if she returned and couldn't find her way home? That fear controlled everything. We've seen families like this. They live between hope and grief, never fully belonging to either. They exist in a space where closure feels like betrayal and moving forward feels like abandonment. They don't ask for pity. They don't ask for attention. They just wait, and waiting becomes their identity. Not knowing is a punishment with no end date. There is no grave to visit, no answers to hold on to, no certainty to build a future around. Every knock on the door carried expectation. Every unfamiliar face sparked a rush of blood to the chest. Every phone call raised the same question. Is this it? Years passed this way, 18 of them. And with every year, hope didn't disappear. It hardened. The Johnson house became a museum of restraint. Nothing was thrown away. Nothing was replaced without debate. Even broken objects stayed where they were, reminders of a life paused rather than ended. Guests felt it immediately. The weight, the careful silence, the way every conversation avoided Emily's name unless invited. Grief had rules here, and everyone followed them. Richard and Lisa never said it out loud, but they shared an unspoken agreement. As long as they stayed here, as long as they waited, as long as they remembered, Emily was still theirs. Leaving would mean admitting defeat, and defeat was unacceptable. Time is supposed to heal. In the Johnson household, time only sharpened the edges. Each passing year stretched the distance between who Emily was and who she might be now. Each passing birthday deepened the ache of missing milestones they could never get back. And yet, they waited, because somewhere deep down, both parents believed the same impossible thing. The time had not taken everything. Not yet. 7 years had passed. 7 years of silence, broken only by rumors, dead ends, and birthdays marked by absence. By 1989, most people no longer expected good news. Even Hope had learned to stay quiet. Then the call came. A young girl had been found wandering alone at a bus station in San Diego. Confused, disoriented, roughly the right age. The resemblance, they said, was strong enough to matter. Strong enough to reopen everything. For Richard and Lisa Johnson, the phone call didn't feel like relief. It felt like danger. Lisa didn't cry at first. She went still. Hope came back without asking whether she was ready for it. It moved faster than reason, faster than caution. Her mind filled in details that hadn't been confirmed yet. Height, hair, eyes. A child who had survived. Richard tried to slow things down. Ask questions. Wanted certainty before movement. But grief doesn't wait for confirmation. Within hours, they were on the road. The drive to San Diego felt endless. Every mile carried a different prayer. Lisa whispered promises she had been holding on to for years. Richard stared at the road, afraid that speaking might jinx something he couldn't afford to lose again. Neither of them spoke about the possibility of disappointment. They both knew it existed, but saying it out loud would have made it real. The car filled with silence and belief in equal measure. They were taken into a small viewing room. A one-way mirror separated them from the girl on the other side. Procedures were explained, but the words barely registered. Lisa pressed her hand against the glass without realizing she had moved. The girl sat slumped in a chair. Dirty clothes, empty eyes, someone else's child, damaged by something terrible. For one brief moment, Lisa leaned forward. Then she stopped. The recognition didn't come. There was no rush of certainty. No instinctive pull. No spark of familiarity. The face on the other side of the glass did not belong to her daughter. Lisa's knees buckled. The sound she made was raw, uncontrolled, and final. Years of restraint broke loose all at once. Staff rushed forward. Richard caught her before she hit the floor. It wasn't Emily. The truth landed hard and without mercy. False hope is not gentle. It doesn't fade quietly. It explodes on impact. The drive back north felt longer than the drive down. The car that once carried belief now carried shock. Lisa stared out the window, unable to speak. Richard clenched the steering wheel until his hands cramped. They didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Hope had returned just long enough to remind them how much it hurt to lose it again. News travels fast when suffering is involved. Before the Johnsons reached home, cameras were already waiting. Reporters crowded sidewalks. Microphones were pushed forward. Questions were asked without permission. Did you think it was her? How does it feel to be wrong? Will you ever give up? Grief became public property. Lisa refused to speak. Richard shielded her with his body, guiding her through flashes and shouting voices. Their pain became a headline, stripped of context and compassion. That night, strangers discussed their disappointment as entertainment. Within days, the attention moved on. The girl in San Diego was identified as someone else's child. The story lost its urgency. Cameras disappeared. The crowd thinned. But the damage remained. Lisa withdrew further into herself. Richard stopped answering calls. Friends didn't know what to say anymore. So many stopped trying. The case didn't move forward. It slid backward. Being wrong carried consequences no one prepared them for. Lisa struggled to trust hope again. Every possible lead felt dangerous now, like touching a live wire. Richard feared the next call more than he wanted it. They had learned something painful. Hope could hurt worse than silence. And yet, they knew they would still answer the phone, because refusing to try felt worse. As the story faded from public view, one question remained, heavy and unresolved. If you were given even a slim chance, would you take it? Would you risk reopening a wound just to know? Would you have gone? There's a moment in every missing person case when urgency expires. Not officially, not with an announcement. It simply thins. In the weeks after the failed San Diego lead, fewer officers came by the Johnson home. Phone calls slowed. Meetings shortened. The search grids stopped expanding. Resources moved elsewhere. New cases arrived with fresher details, louder evidence, clearer timelines. Emily Johnson's disappearance didn't compete well against crimes that shouted. Hers stayed quiet. What had once been a dedicated task force slowly dissolved. 20 officers became 10. 10 became 4. 4 became 2. By the early 1990s, the Emily Johnson Task Force existed mostly on paper. Detective Silas Vance remained. So did his partner, B. Morales, younger and stubborn enough to still believe persistence mattered. They reviewed notes again. They rechecked timelines again. They knocked on doors again. Nothing answered back. Los Angeles is not built to hold on to quiet tragedies. It swells. It shifts. People come and go without leaving traces behind. Streets change names. Neighborhoods lose their original faces. The faded blue sedan never resurfaced. No plate. No owner. No reason to pull it from the noise of millions of vehicles. Every potential lead dissolved into paperwork and probability. Emily's case did not fail because no one cared. It failed because there was nothing solid to hold. Eventually, the decision was made. Emily Johnson's case will be classified as inactive. The word sounded clean, neutral, almost polite. In practice, it meant the files were boxed up, photos stacked, reports tied together with string, everything labeled and stored in a basement archive where unanswered cases waited without complaint. Once boxed, a case doesn't die. It sleeps, and sleeping cases rarely wake on their own. Detective Vance didn't argue the decision. He understood how departments worked. He had spent his career inside that system, but understanding didn't bring peace. Before retiring in 1994, he made a quiet choice. He copied the file, not to reopen it officially, not to break protocol, just to keep it close. Emily's face followed him home, printed on aging paper, edges soft for being handled too often. He told himself it was temporary. It never was. Retirement freed Vance from deadlines and supervisors, but it didn't free him from memory. He visited the Johnsons every December, not as an officer, not with updates, just as a man who had failed to return their daughter. They didn't talk about the case much anymore. They talked about weather, about small changes, about nothing important. And yet, the case sat between them every time, unspoken and heavy. Some cases don't let you go. By the mid-1990s, Emily would have been a teenager. That thought unsettled everyone who still remembered her name. What has stolen childhood grow into? What habits survived? What damage remained invisible? Without answers, imagination filled the gaps. And imagination was not kind. Richard and Lisa aged faster than they should have. Their hair turned gray early. Their faces held lines carved by waiting. They were still standing, but something in them had stopped moving. We've seen cases like this before. A child vanishes. Search is slow. Files close. Years pass. New tragedies take the spotlight. Old ones fade into storage rooms and memories. But fading doesn't mean finished. It just means unresolved. And unresolved stories have a way of returning when no one expects them to. By the late 1990s, Emily Johnson's name no longer appeared in headlines. Flyers were gone. Polls stood border. The phone rang less often. The silence settled into something permanent. Yet somewhere inside a box, inside a folder, inside a system that never fully forgets, the truth waited. Not for effort, not for hope, just for the right moment. Cold cases don't announce their return. They wait for chance, for timing, for one small mistake. And somewhere, far from the street where a red ball once rolled to a stop, that mistake was already forming. She was called Chloe, not at birth, not by law, only by the people who controlled the air she breathed. Chloe lived far from cities, far from neighbors, far from places where questions traveled easily. The land stretched wide and empty, dust-colored and unforgiving. Roads ran straight for miles, then vanished into nothing. She did not remember arriving there. That absence felt normal to her. Chloe's days followed a strict rhythm. Wake, medication, food measured carefully, rest, silence. She was told her body was fragile, that stress could harm her, that the outside world was dangerous, that strangers carried sickness and cruelty. Mirrors were discouraged, photographs forbidden, questions redirected. You don't need to know, she was told. We know what's best. She believed it. Children often do. There were no written rules, only consequences. Chloe learned early what happened when she pushed too hard. Voices sharpened, meals disappeared, medication increased, fear replaced curiosity. She stopped asking why she wasn't allowed near other children. She stopped wondering why doctors only visited at home. She stopped thinking about school. Education came through worksheets with no logos, no dates, no identifying marks. History ended early. Geography barely existed. The world was kept small on purpose. Chloe's sickness defined her, or so she was told. Headaches meant she had overexerted herself. Weakness meant she needed more pills. Confusion meant her condition was progressing. Pain was framed as proof. When she cried, it confirmed the diagnosis. When she resisted, it justified restraint. The narrative never changed. She was unwell. She was lucky to be protected. She would not survive on her own. There was a man in the house. He was not loud. He was not violent in obvious ways. His control lived in observation. He watched how much she ate, how she walked, how long she slept. He corrected her posture. He adjusted her tone. He decided when she spoke and when she stayed quiet. He smiled often. That made it worse. There was also a woman. She softened the edges. She explained the rules with kindness. She framed isolation as love. She called confinement care. Other parents don't understand children like you, she would say. They would hurt you without meaning to. The woman brushed Chloe's hair every night, braided it tightly, told her stories about how rare she was. Special, delicate, dependent. Time passed strangely. Seasons shifted, but Chloe could not place them. Birthdays were quiet. No candes, no cards, just an extra dessert and another reminder of how fortunate she was. She aged without milestones. No school photos, no friends' houses, no eslipovers, just growth measured in inches and compliance. Sometimes Chloe dreamed of places she had never seen. A green yard, a metal gate, a red object rolling across concrete. The dreams left her shaken. When she mentioned them, she was told there were side effects, that her mind invented stories under strain. More pills followed. The dreams stopped coming. Doctors visited occasionally. They didn't speak much to Chloe directly. They reviewed notes, asked the man questions, accepted answers without challenge. No hospital visits, no second opinions, no outside records. The illness existed only within the walls of that house, and Chloe never noticed the absence. Chloe spent hours watching the horizon. The desert did not change much. That comforted her. She imagined movement beyond the dust. Cars passing, people laughing, lives happening without supervision. Those thoughts felt dangerous. She pushed them down. Chloe was never locked in. That was the clever part. She believed she couldn't survive outside. She believed her body would fail. She believed strangers would hurt her. The gate remained unlocked. She never tested it. By the late 1990s, Chloe was grown. Her body carried the signs of adulthood. Her voice deepened. Her posture changed. But inside, time remained paused. She still asked permission to drink water. Still waited for instructions. Still believed obedience equaled safety. Control requires constant pressure, and pressure leaves marks. Chloe began to notice inconsistencies. Medication that changed color. Stories that shifted slightly. explanations that contradicted earlier ones. Small things, enough to disturb her sleep. One night, alone, Chloe whispered her name aloud. It sounded wrong. She didn't know why. She tried again. Still wrong. The feeling scared her more than any rule ever had. Somewhere beyond that house, the world believed Chloe did not exist. Somewhere else, a missing child had grown into an absence. The two stories had not met yet, but they were moving toward each other. Quietly, the attic was cramped, filled with old boxes, moth-eaten furniture, and stacks of newspapers yellowed by time. Dust motes floated in the thin beams of sunlight, sneaking through the small window. Every step sent a shiver down the spine, a mix of anticipation and dread. In a corner, Emily's mother noticed a box labeled with faded letters she didn't recognize. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing an assortment of items that felt wrong. Papers, trinkets, and a newspaper clipping that immediately caught her eye. The headline was dated almost 2 decades ago. Her breath hitched. Something in the photograph, a pair of eyes, made her pause. The eyes staring from the yellowed photograph were impossibly familiar. They weren't just eyes, they were Emily's. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain someone in the house could hear it. Her mind raced. Could it be? The memory of that fateful day, the chaos, the sirens, it all came rushing back in disjointed fragments. Tiny details she had buried resurfaced. The hand that reached for her, the way the sunlight fell across the sidewalk, the sound of her own voice calling for help. Her fear was sharp, immediate, and almost paralyzing. But so was curiosity. How had this photograph ended up here? Who had kept it hidden? She sifted through the box, uncovering more fragments from a life she thought was gone. A child's shoe, a small doll missing an eye, a crumpled drawing with childish handwriting. Each item was a needle pricking at old wounds, forcing memories to surface that she hadn't dared touch in years. And then a notebook, pages yellowed and brittle, written in a careful, deliberate hand. Names, dates, locations. Notes on people she vaguely recognized. The pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know existed were suddenly scattered before her. Her pulse raced. Questions clawed at her mind. Could someone have known all along? Could Emily have been closer than anyone ever imagined? Every instinct screamed for her to leave the attic, to shut the lid and pretend none of this existed. But the pull of understanding, of finally seeing the truth, was stronger. She felt an unfamiliar resolve. This wasn't just a chance to find answers. It was a call to confront a reality she had been too afraid to face. Her fingers lingered on the newspaper clipping. She traced the face with a trembling hand. Recognition and disbelief collided inside her. She could feel the weight of years pressing down on her chest, but the fire of determination kept her rooted. Then, in the dim corner of the attic, she noticed a small envelope tucked beneath the boxes. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to someone from the past, someone who had disappeared from her life, but never from her memory. She tore it open with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, notes, and a map marked with locations she remembered only faintly. It was a breadcrumb trail, a map that could finally lead to answers after 18 long years. A chill ran through her. This was it. Everything could change with what she discovered next. The missing years, the uncertainty, the endless nights of worry. It was all pointing to this moment. She whispered under her breath, "If this moment scared you, stay with us." The attic, once a forgotten corner of the house, had transformed into a crucible of revelation. The past was no longer distant. It was alive, tangible, and demanding to be confronted. Detective Marcus Hayes had a reputation for relentless persistence, though few knew him beyond the precinct. His desk was cluttered with digital files, cold cases stretching back decades. Most of his colleagues had given up, but Marcus couldn't. He refused to let time bury his story, especially when a life was at stake. He had started digitizing old cases, scanning photographs, notes, and reports. Every page told a story. Every photograph carried a ghost. Tonight, as he sifted through files dating back to the 1980s, one particular folder caught his attention. The label read simply, "Unresolved Missing Children." In the storage room of the precinct, Marcus lifted a dusty cardboard box. It smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten years. Inside were manila folders, brittle with age. Each folder held photographs, typed reports, scribbled notes, reminders of lives interrupted, families left in despair. As he flipped through them, a small photograph fell out. Marcus picked it up, brushing off the dust. The eyes in the picture made him pause. Something about them tugged at a memory buried deep in his mind. He scanned the paperwork. Names he had long forgotten surfaced one by one, until a single one struck like lightning. Emily Johnson, 7 years old. Missing. 1982. Marcus froze, staring at the typed letters. He had read this case countless times, but something about seeing it now, in the quiet of the night, felt different. It was as if the timing itself was deliberate. This name, this story, had reemerged for a reason he couldn't yet define. Marcus couldn't ignore the sharpness of the coincidence. He had been reviewing cold cases for weeks, yet only now did Emily's file demand his attention. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the folder fully. Notes from detectives who had worked the case before him, photographs of the girl, reports of sightings, all meticulously recorded, yet no resolution had come. A voice in the back of his mind whispered that something was aligning, that paths long separated were converging. Every detail seemed to call out to him. Dates, locations, the faint notes of hope buried in the margins. The coincidence was too sharp to ignore. It felt deliberate, as if fate itself was nudging him forward. Marcus spent hours poring over every detail, connecting the dots that had been overlooked for nearly 2 decades. Each page deepened the mystery, yet revealed patterns no one had noticed before. The folder contained one final document, a report from a retired officer who had seen Emily the day she vanished. Something in the description struck Marcus instantly, a peculiar habit, a distinct feature. His pulse quickened. Emily Johnson wasn't just another case. She was someone who could still be found. As dawn crept through the blinds, Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted yet energized. The story was no longer static in files. It was alive, waiting to be completed. He whispered under his breath, "This isn't coincidence. This is the moment everything changes." The threads of fate were aligning, converging on one point. Emily's story, long frozen in time, was about to intersect with someone who refused to let it fade. Marcus knew instinctively that the discovery upstairs in that old house and the cold files at the precinct were pieces of the same puzzle, bound together by forces neither he nor anyone else could fully explain. Arthur had been quiet for hours, sitting in his dimly lit room. The house felt oppressive, the air heavy with secrets and unsaid confessions. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest. His vision blurred. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He collapsed into a chair, gasping, his body betraying him. Panic clawed at him. He knew the world outside wouldn't wait, wouldn't forgive. For the first time in years, vulnerability overpowered control. The clock ticked mercilessly. Every second that passed reminded him that Emily's chance and his own escape depended on action now. Emily's heart pounded as she approached the old iron gate at the back of the property. Rusted hinges groaned as she pushed it open. Each step toward freedom felt surreal, almost unreal. She glanced back at the house, a place that had held her captive in more ways than one. The night was cold, the wind sharp against her cheeks. She forced herself to focus, every nerve on high alert. The world beyond that gate seemed vast, frightening, yet promising safety. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, lit only by passing headlights. Emily kept her eyes forward, but every sound behind her made her jump. Tires hummed, trucks rumbled, a distant siren pierced the night. Her legs ached, but adrenaline carried her forward. Memories of the past, the locked doors, the whispers, the fear, fueled her determination. Every step away from the house was a step back toward life, toward reclaiming the years stolen from her. Exhausted, she spotted a small diner glowing like a beacon in the darkness. She slipped inside, collapsing into a booth in the corner. The hum of conversation and clatter of dishes was almost unbearable, a strange mix of comfort and anxiety. Her eyes scanned the room, wary of everyone yet desperate for human connection. She placed her hands over her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. She needed help, but speaking might give away too much too soon. A waitress approached, noticing her distress. Emily's voice quivered as she asked for a phone. Every second felt like a lifetime, every passing glance a test of courage. Fingers shaking, Emily dialed the number she had memorized from scraps of memory, from whispered names she had clung to. Marcus picked up on the other end, his voice instantly grounding, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. He listened as she whispered her location, giving fragments of details that had seemed meaningless for years. Marcus's mind raced, connecting this sudden thread with the cold files he had reviewed. The diner felt distant, the clatter fading into the background. Every second counted. The danger outside was real, but the knowledge that someone now believed her, someone who could act, brought a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in 18 years. Emily stayed on the line with Marcus, her eyes fixed on the road outside. Headlights approached in uneven intervals, shadows moving across the pavement. She couldn't afford to falter, couldn't afford to doubt. Each passing vehicle was a risk, each sound a potential threat. She felt raw, exposed, yet alive. The years of fear had sharpened her senses, and now they guided her steps toward safety. She glanced down at her hands, remembering the countless nights she had dreamed of this moment. This was her chance, and she wasn't going to let slip away. As Emily stepped out of the diner into the freezing night, the highway stretched before her. Marcus promised he was on his way, but the distance between them felt infinite. Every second was a test of endurance, every shadow a warning that danger wasn't gone. The camera could linger on the tension, the uncertainty, the fragile hope hanging in the balance. Viewers are left with a question: would she make it before the threat closes in again? Emily sat on the edge of a stiff motel bed, staring at the patterned carpet as if it could answer her questions. The room smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee, the air heavy with uncertainty. Outside, headlights occasionally swept across the blinds, cutting the darkness into harsh stripes. She hugged her knees, every sound amplified. The hum of the fridge, the squeak of the chair, the distant murmur of cars on the highway. Here, in this temporary sanctuary, the past and present collided. Every tick of the clock reminded her that nothing would be resolved immediately. Memories surged unbidden. Could she truly be Emily Johnson? Was this reality, or some cruel trick of time and memory? Doubts gnawed at her, each one sharper than the last. She stared at her hands, once tiny and vulnerable, now marked by years of survival. A question lingered. What if this DNA test didn't confirm what her heart already knew? The thought made her chest tighten. Every heartbeat echoed the uncertainty she had carried for nearly 2 decades. Her mind wandered to the world she had left behind in 1982, a world without cell phones, no instant connections, no immediate access to the outside. The contrasts were stark. Now, she sat in a room with a telephone line and a fax machine, waiting for results that could take hours, maybe days. The speed of life had accelerated, yet here, time dragged, stretching the anxiety to its limit. Every electronic beep, every ringing tone, reminded her that answers were tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly out of reach. Hours passed slowly, each minute heavy with anticipation. Emily sipped lukewarm coffee, her hands trembling, her stomach in knots. She tried to distract herself with news reports, but the words blurred. Her mind replayed snippets of memory, each fragment a question demanding resolution. Sleep eluded her. The room seemed smaller with each passing hour, the shadows longer, the silence more pressing. Waiting became a test of endurance, a confrontation with every fear she had held since she was 7. The phone remained silent. Marcus had left instructions, no calls unless urgent. Emily's isolation was complete, yet strangely comforting. In this waiting, she felt her own strength and fragility simultaneously. Her mind raced, imagining outcomes. What if she wasn't recognized? What if 18 years of hope dissolved with a single negative result? The tension was quiet, internal, but relentless. Every sigh, every shallow breath was a reminder of how close she was to the truth and how vulnerable she felt in this limbo. Eventually, she leaned back, allowing herself to relax for a brief moment. She noticed the muted colors of the motel walls, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the rhythm of the outside world continuing unaware of her inner turmoil. For the first time, she could feel patience entering the space, a fragile, tense patience. Waiting no longer felt like suspension alone. It became a moment of gathering strength, of preparing for what revelation might bring. The test results were the key, but her readiness mattered just as much. Emily stared at the phone. Each ring, or lack thereof, sharpened her senses. The next moment would decide whether the years of fear, loss, and hope converged into closure or despair. The audience is left holding their breath, experiencing her anxiety, understanding her isolation, and feeling the weight of anticipation with her. The phone rang, cutting through the tension like a lightning strike. Emily's fingers trembled as she picked it up. Marcus's voice was steady but urgent. "Emily, we have confirmation." Her breath caught. Every muscle in her body tensed. The years of uncertainty, the nights of fear, the long shadows of doubt, all condensed into this single moment. "Your name is Emily Johnson." The words landed with the force of a sledgehammer. Emily froze, letting them echo in her mind. Emily Johnson, the child she had been, the girl who vanished, the young woman who had survived. It was all reaffirmed in those 3 simple words. Tears welled instantly, spilling over and catching the dim light of the motel room. She whispered her own name, tasting it, claiming it. Emily Johnson. A photograph arrived digitally, an image that had lain hidden for decades. Emily stared at it. There she was, 7 years old, eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and fear. And next to her, an older version, unmistakable, herself, alive, looking back from the present. The collision of past and present was overwhelming. Memories flooded her, laughter interrupted, hands reaching out, moments stolen. She traced the lines of her childhood face with trembling fingers, acknowledging the girl she once was and the woman she had become. With confirmation came a rush of emotions. Relief, disbelief, rage at the years lost, and an uncontainable surge of joy. She could finally speak her name aloud without fear, without hesitation. Emily Johnson had been hidden, erased, and now she was found, whole and unbroken. She sat on the edge of the motel bed, laughing and crying in the same breath, the weight of the years finally lifting. Every lost birthday, every unanswered question, every tear shed in silence, all converged into a single cathartic release. The audience feels the shock alongside her, the long wait, the uncertainty, the fear, all resolved in an instant. Marcus's voice on the line, the digital photograph, the spoken name, they are not just confirmations, they are vindications. Emily's eyes glistened with a mixture of anger at the past and gratitude for the present. She was no longer a missing girl. She was Emily Johnson, alive, remembered, and recognized. The room was quiet, almost painfully so, as the finality settled in. Emily held the phone to her chest, grounding herself in reality. She had survived the years of absence, the isolation, the fear of being forgotten. And now, she could step forward, reclaim her life, and face a world she had imagined only in fragments for 18 long years. Her voice, trembling yet resolute, spoke aloud. "I am Emily Johnson. I am here." The confirmation was more than a fact. It was a rebirth. The quiet of the early morning was shattered by the roar of engines and the heavy boots of law enforcement. SWAT teams moved with precision, surrounding the old suburban house as flashlights cut through the darkness. Inside, Emily's captors were unaware that their control had ended. Every corner was watched, every exit blocked. Marcus coordinated the operation from a distance, his pulse steady, every step rehearsed over countless hours of planning. A black sedan, once used to transport Emily, was discovered behind a row of overgrown hedges. Evidence was collected carefully: fingerprints, discarded items, and traces of the years she had been hidden. Seeing the vehicle, so familiar from old case files and memories, sent a wave of emotion through those present. It was proof, tangible and undeniable, that the nightmare had been real. The door was breached. The individuals who had kept Emily from her family for 18 years were confronted with the consequences of their actions. Shock and disbelief flashed across their faces as officers read their rights, restrained them, and led them away. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the power had shifted. The fear they had wielded over a child, over a family, over a community, had ended. Justice had arrived, not quietly, but with the force of truth made visible. Neighbors who had once whispered about the missing girl now gathered, watching as law enforcement restored order. Relief and validation spread through the community. Years of speculation, worry, and heartbreak were met with undeniable resolution. For Emily's family, it was not just a procedural success. It was the moral confirmation that the world still upheld accountability. Every photograph, every note, every testimony had led to this moment of closure. Local reporters captured the moment. The recovered sedan, the arrested captors, the police officers moving with quiet authority. Community members shared a collective exhale, witnessing that the girl who had vanished for so long was finally vindicated. Emily's return and the arrests symbolized the triumph of persistence, courage, and the refusal to let wrongs go unaddressed. The emotional weight of the moment was not lost on anyone. Here, justice was tangible, and the people who had waited, hoped, and feared could finally breathe. Emily's parents had aged in ways time alone could explain. Lines traced years of worry, nights spent imagining the worst, and hearts that had carried hope alongside unbearable fear. They sat in the living room, staring at the clock, hesitant to believe the call that promised her return. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound outside the window made them tense. After 18 years, even the simplest noises felt significant, loaded with possibility. Then, the moment arrived. The front door opened, and Marcus stood aside, allowing Emily to step forward. Time seemed to stretch, the world narrowing to a single frame. The woman before them, alive and unmistakably their daughter. Emily's eyes met theirs, and in that instant, decades of absence collapsed. The small gestures of disbelief, a half smile, a blink, a tentative step, spoke louder than words ever could. Her father's hand trembled as he reached out. Her mother's voice caught in her throat. Recognition ignited like fire. "Emily," they whispered simultaneously, a fragile question laden with longing. Emily froze, overwhelmed by the sudden convergence of past and present. Then, slowly, she nodded, tears streaming, relief and joy bleeding together. This was the moment her heart had rehearsed countless times, a reunion imagined in fragments of memory and hope. Finally, they were together, arms wrapped around each other in a hold that spoke of lost years, regained time, and survival against every odds. Her mother's sobs shook her shoulders. Her father's grip was protective, fierce, as if he could shield her from every hurt that had ever come. The embrace was longer than any moment should allow. It carried the weight of 18 years of absence, every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every whispered prayer. Emily pressed her face against her mother's shoulder, tasting the scent of home she had longed for and feeling the solidity of family once more. Neighbors and community members gathered outside, witnessing the reunion from a respectful distance. Cameras were held back, phones lowered, as they allowed the raw humanity of the moment to speak for itself. This wasn't just a family reunited. It was a reminder of resilience, of hope preserved despite despair, and of the enduring bonds that define our lives. The audience could feel the emotion radiating, connecting them to something primal and universal. The joy of return, the relief of closure, and the deep, unspoken understanding that life, though fractured, could still be restored. Even as the initial embrace ended, Emily's parents clung to her hands, stroking her face, whispering apologies and expressions of love. She reassured them, gently, that she was strong, that she had survived, and that now they could move forward together. Every sob, every laugh, every tear formed an echo that lingered in the room, embedding itself in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The intensity was overwhelming, yet pure, a raw celebration of survival and the reclamation of life stolen for so long. Viewers are invited into this intimacy, feeling the release of tension built over the course of years. The shared humanity of the moment is impossible to ignore. The struggle, the longing, the triumph of reunion. It's a payoff that rewards patience, emotional investment, and empathy. The camera could linger on hands intertwined, eyes meeting across the room, the subtle movements of hesitation and recognition, and the eventual surrender to relief and joy. As the family settled together in the living room, the quiet of the house became a companionable sound. No words were needed. The emotions themselves told the story. Emily, at last, had returned not only to her parents but to herself. The reunion was complete, and with it came a sense of justice, closure, and the reaffirmation of love's endurance. The audience could feel the tension dissolve, replaced with a profound connection to the characters and their journey, leaving hearts full and minds reflective of the fragility and resilience of life. Investigators pieced together the reasons behind Emily's disappearance, revealing a chilling combination of control and opportunity. The captors had exploited gaps in supervision, moments when trust and routine were weaponized. Every interview, every document, every piece of evidence pointed to a disturbing clarity. Emily was taken not at random, but at a moment when vulnerability met intent. The motive was neither simple nor impulsive. It was calculated, cold, and entirely human in its cruelty. The timeline revealed that the abduction was facilitated by small, overlooked lapses, a neighbor distracted, a gate left unlocked, a moment of inattention. Each seemingly trivial detail had been magnified into a window of opportunity. The methodical exploitation of these chances highlighted a terrifying truth. Ordinary moments could be transformed into life-altering consequences. Those who had underestimated the danger now faced the moral and legal weight of their actions. Psychologists and investigators examined the captors' behaviors, revealing patterns of obsession, delusion, and distorted moral reasoning. They understood the world as one that could be manipulated to their advantage, disregarding empathy, consequence, and human suffering. Every action, every decision reflected a mind fractured and self-centered, where fear, dominance, and control became guiding principles. The study of such pathology was unsettling yet essential. It explained the seemingly inexplicable and provided insight into the mind that had confined Emily for nearly 2 decades. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Families, journalists, and psychologists debated endlessly. How could this happen? What signs were missed? Could have been prevented? The discussions were heated, reflecting the moral uncertainty and outrage that the case inspired. Viewers are drawn into the debate, questioning their assumptions about trust, safety, and the capacity for human cruelty. This revelation forced a confrontation with uncomfortable truths. Evil did not always wear a mask of horror. It often appeared as ordinary people, ordinary circumstances, seemingly normal routines twisted into something destructive. Audiences are left grappling with moral ambiguity, the fragility of safety, the responsibility of vigilance, and the complexity of human behavior. The story challenges assumptions, encouraging reflection on accountability, justice, and the human capacity for both harm and redemption. By presenting motive, method, and psychological insight, the audience gains understanding, if not closure, over the horror. The narrative balances facts with emotional resonance, allowing viewers to feel the gravity of the crime while contemplating the broader implications for society. The tension is intellectual rather than physical. The fear is not immediate, but reflective. This creates a space for debate, empathy, and moral engagement, a moment where viewers are compelled to consider not only the case, but the forces that allow such tragedies to occur. Emily began the slow process of healing, guided by compassionate therapists who helped her untangle nearly 2 decades of fear, confusion, and lost childhood. Each session was a step toward reclaiming her sense of self, confronting memories without being overwhelmed, and learning to trust again. The emotional work was grueling, but with each conversation, she regained pieces of herself she had thought were gone forever. Talking about her experiences brought tears, sometimes anger, but also the first genuine moments of relief and understanding in years. Re-entering the world was both thrilling and daunting. Emily learned to navigate public spaces, relationships, and everyday life with new confidence, supported by family, friends, and mentors who had guided her reintegration. Simple actions, walking down a street without fear, going to a store, even enjoying a quiet meal, became milestones. Each step reinforced her resilience and affirmed that life, despite its scars, was still full of possibility. Determined not to let her experience be solely a story of pain, Emily turned her journey into advocacy. She spoke publicly about child safety, early intervention, and the importance of vigilance in communities. Her voice became a beacon, encouraging others to act, report, and protect vulnerable individuals. Emily's story inspired policy changes, heightened awareness, and empowered survivors to come forward. What had once been an ordeal transformed into a force for meaningful change. Her family, too, experienced a profound journey of restoration, reconnecting emotionally, rebuilding trust, and learning to communicate openly became central to their recovery. Long-absent traditions were revived, new routines established, and every shared laugh, meal, or story became a testament to resilience. The bonds of family were not just restored. They were strengthened by the trials they had endured and survived together. Neighbors, friends, and supporters who had followed Emily's story remained engaged, offering encouragement and solidarity. Community gatherings, charity events, and local discussions emphasized the power of collective action and the importance of vigilance. Her journey became a reminder that trauma could be met with support, understanding, and proactive engagement. The community's involvement reinforced the idea that healing is not solitary. It is shared, visible, and transformative. Looking back, Emily acknowledged both the darkness she had endured and the light she had reclaimed. Her experience became a testament to perseverance, courage, and the importance of confronting the past while building a future. She realized that while trauma could shape a person, it did not have to define them. With each day, she found meaning, purpose, and renewed hope, and she became a living example of resilience for those who face their own struggles. Emily's story was no longer solely her own. It became a symbol of survival, advocacy, and justice. Every life touched by her courage carried forward the lessons she had lived: vigilance, compassion, and unwavering determination. Through education, outreach, and storytelling, Emily's legacy ensured that her experience would foster awareness, safety, and empowerment for future generations. Her journey demonstrated that even after unimaginable hardship, life could be reclaimed with strength, purpose, and love. Even after years, cases like Emily's remain alive in the shadows of communities. Missing children, unsolved disappearances, and forgotten victims still exist, waiting for someone to act, to notice, to remember. The stories may fade from headlines, but the pain does not. Families continue to hope, fear, and grieve, often silently. Each unsolved case is a life suspended in uncertainty, a reminder that vigilance is never optional. Emily's survival was possible because fragments of memory, long dormant, were eventually recognized and acted upon. Every detail mattered: a name recalled, a photograph discovered, a tip followed. Her story reminds us that memory is not passive. It can be a tool for justice, a lifeline for the lost, and a shield against the erasure of human lives. Every witness, every observer, every small action has the potential to change a life. As a viewer, you're not just watching a story unfold. You are being reminded that awareness matters. The next missing child, the next unresolved disappearance could be in your community. Your knowledge, attention, and action can prevent tragedy. It's easy to assume someone else will act. It's easy to turn away. But the cost of inaction can never be reversed. The awareness you gain today may become the difference between loss and rescue tomorrow. If this ever happens near you, you'll wish you stayed informed. Don't let fear, distraction, or apathy leave someone vulnerable. Subscribe now to stay vigilant, to learn, and to act before tragedy strikes. Knowledge is a responsibility, is a shield for the innocent, a voice for the unheard, and a lifeline for those who cannot speak. This is not just a channel. It's a tool, a community, and a commitment to preventing loss where it still exists. Missing children, unresolved crimes, and overlooked cases demand attention. Every subscriber adds to a network that can make the difference. While the weight of these stories is heavy, there is hope. Emily's story ends in survival, love, and restoration. That hope exists because people acted, persisted, and refused to let the story go untold. By subscribing, you honor that hope. You contribute to a culture of awareness, compassion, and responsibility. You ensure that the next Emily, somewhere, has a chance to be found, recognized, and returned to the life she deserves. Remember, your vigilance today may save a life tomorrow. Stay informed, stay alert, and stay compassionate.